Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to talk about Stepping Stone Ministries today. So a little backstory of how this project came about. In 2021, I was working at Corpus Christi Parish in funeral ministry. But I was approached by the University of Mary and asked if I would be willing to consider coming out to teach at the university because they were going to be starting a master's in social work program. But that required me to go to grad school and get a graduate degree. So in January of 22, I started my master's in social work degree at the University of Kentucky. And part of that, I needed to do a full-time internship somewhere. And I have always had this desire to work in hospice. And so I was all ready to go and work in hospice care at CHI. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to start the internship, the University of Kentucky and the hospital couldn't come to an agreement on a contract. So I had to find a new place to do my internship. So I thought, ministry on the margins. I did other stuff there. I was kind of familiar with it. So I asked Sister Kathleen if I could do my social work internship there, and she agreed. But they didn't have anything to meet the needs or the requirements of a master's degree. So what was decided was that I would start some kind of a program. I was given the advice from Sister Kathleen to take a week, look around, find a need and figure out how to fix it, and pretend like money is no object. So that's what I did. The first week, I spent at the overnight coffee house. And at that time, the overnight coffee house was a pretty new endeavor. It's not a homeless shelter, but they keep their doors open at night so people can come in off the street and they can come and go. You can be under the influence of alcohol or drugs, but you can't be causing a problem while you're there. So the week that I spent there in January, very cold, and what I witnessed were very, very chronically ill individuals laying on the floor. People would come in, it's January, they'd come in, we'd notice they have frostbite. So we would take them to the hospital, get it excised, wrapped up, and what happens, they get sent right back out onto the street. Because there was no safe discharge place for the hospitals to discharge a homeless person to that still needed to recover, there were several times while I was there that the hospitals would put the person that was discharged in a cab and drop them off at the front door of Ministry on the Margins, which wasn't even open during the day at that time. So they'd be sitting out there on the street in a wheelchair waiting for us to open at night. Gentleman that just comes to mind, he had heart failure and he was laying on the floor just writhing in pain because he couldn't remember if he took his heart medication or not. It bothered me to go home knowing that people were suffering like that. So I looked around to see, is there a discharge location in Bismarck for people? At that time, though, it was still the effects of COVID, so things were not totally open. So the United Way was not really an open shelter. And if you were going to stay there, you had to be able to scale to the top bunk of a bed. I'm not chronically ill, but I don't know that I could even scale to the top. They also didn't have the staff to, if someone came in with a medical need that was somewhat serious, you couldn't stay there because they just didn't have the staff to cover it. At that time, I and a few other sisters were living at our convent in town, which is a big apartment building on the corner of 12th and Broadway. It's across from St. Alexius Hospital. And while it was still an apartment building, the apartments had been renovated for communal living. So we didn't have kitchens in our apartments. It was just a bedroom and living space. And I knew we weren't going to be living there forever. And I thought, we can't just let this building sit here and rot. Like, there's got to be a use for it. Could we open medical respite? We didn't own the apartment building. It was owned by the hospital. But I did approach my community and ask if this is something that we could do. And I was basically told, well, we can't do it, but you can do it, and we will help you do it. So that is what my grad school project ended up being. Most of my classes focused on this. We got the okay from the hospital that we could use the apartment building for that. So when we ended up moving out in June of 22, the apartment building was empty. We hadn't had the lease signed because the lease comes from a corporate office somewhere in America. So it takes a very long time, and then it passes from different offices to different offices. So in the meantime, nobody was really checking on the building, and there was a flood that happened, which, okay, it's a flood, fine. We'll figure out how to navigate this. I graduated from grad school, and I was very lucky that my supervisor for my internship was Martha Reichert, who had been running the hospice program, hospice and home health for CHI. She came with me, and she became the executive director for this program. So she was working full-time on this. We got some grants to renovate the space and to fix the flooded rooms. And then in October, just as the renovations for the building started, they'd been going for 3 weeks, I got a call that the building was on fire. So as we're standing in the parking lot looking at the building burning, I'm thinking, okay, we've had a flood, a fire. If we get a swarm of locusts, I am like completely done. And then we're like, oh wait, we did have the swarm of locusts, because when renovations were started, one of the rooms that had been flooded, because it was bare and it's like a brick building, wasps had gotten into the building and infested the area. But we had invested so much time and energy in this project, and we were like deflated. And for 2 days, we were like, we can't go on. This is impossible, because we had not had to really have any money. The lease that we had gotten for the apartment building, they gave it to us for $1 a year for 5 years and paid all of the utilities. That's how we could do this project, because we didn't have any money. And then we got a grant from Common Spirit Health. They had put an initiative out for $23 million for homeless initiatives for people that needed medical care. But most of the money went to hospitals in California, and we just happened to see a little blurb in a magazine about it. And we're like, yeah, could we? So we contacted them, and we got a $100,000 operational grant that we could use for anything that we needed. And I've never had a grant where it literally could be for anything that you needed. So we got to work. One of the things for the building, we liked where it was at because it wasn't in a residential area. It was close to the medical campus. It was just the perfect location. And we were like, how are we ever gonna find another spot? We didn't wanna go into a neighborhood because we don't wanna disturb anybody. And the people that we're gonna serve, they're homeless, and there's like feelings that people associate with homeless people. So we went to a real estate agent and said, these are the things that we would like and need. We don't have any money, but is there anything even available? And what he came up with, like right off the top of his head, was this railway credit union building, which is right behind the Bismarck Motor Motel, where most of our people will stay anyway. Not in a residential area, but someone stepped forward and gave us a very generous donation, and we were able to purchase that building so we could continue. And why is it important for medical respite in this area? Since COVID, and I'm not aware how bad it was before COVID, but definitely since COVID, you may notice that there's less healthcare workers. So they don't have as many available beds in Bismarck as they used to. So there's no guarantee if you go to the hospital that you're gonna be able to go into a hospital in Bismarck. You might get shipped to Fargo or somewhere else like that. Medical respite will allow the hospitals to discharge people, homeless people, to us, opening up beds for more acute patients. Also, where it costs $2,300 to $2,500 a day to keep someone in the hospital, our facility, you could probably stay there for $200 a night. We We are not a homeless shelter. We are medical respite. So an individual coming to us has to be directly discharged from a hospital with an acute medical need. So that would be frostbite, or you can have newly diagnosed diabetes, but it can't just be because someone has diabetes, be an ulcer on the foot, something like that. You can have mental illness. We will take you, but you just have to be stable when you come to us and agree to take your medication. What we do not provide any medical services ourselves, so none of our staff are going to be doing the medical services. Home health will come in. Public health has given us a nurse part-time, 5 days a week, to come in and help with cares. We will take people to and from their medical appointments. Transportation is a big issue, so when we went and visited hospitals and asked emergency room doctors what's an issue with treating homeless people, they're like, they never come back for their care. They don't know, it's just impossible for them. So they really see this as a great opportunity to do that follow-up care to truly get people back on their feet and better. We have no set time limit for a person to be in our facility. It could be 2 days, it could be 3 months. The average stay in one of these facilities in the United States is 45 days. But if we have someone come to us that's having chemotherapy treatments, it could be a longer stay. While they're with us, we are truly trying to break the cycle of homelessness. So you're not just coming to us for medical assistance. We are working with you holistically, because if you say that you want to have permanent housing by the time you leave us, we will do everything in our power to make sure that happens. But we're not just going to help you get an apartment. There's things that you're going to have to do to justify that. So we're going to teach living skills, because I think a lot of us take for granted that everybody knows how to live. When I graduated from college, I didn't know how to go out and get an apartment. I didn't know how to pay bills. You just assume that people know how to do that. They're adults. But if you grew up in a home where you were just constantly couch surfing or didn't have a stable home, you're not going to be taught that. So working very closely with the University of Mary, occupational therapy is going to come in 2 days of work to teach living skills to our people that are staying with us. PT is going to come in, nursing students, social work students. And a little bit selfishly on my part, I think when I'm teaching, I want my students to work with actual people. I don't want to just hand them a piece of paper and say, here, let's do a fictional case study. Let's work with an actual person and teach them the skills and find out what are the barriers and what other organizations we need to work with. There are some pretty strict criteria to be with us. So that might be a barrier to some people not wanting to stay with us, because you can't use alcohol or drugs. You cannot leave our facility without one of us, because if you're well enough to go walking uptown, you're probably not in need of our respite services. Also, it's a safety issue. Our neighbor is the Bismarck Motor Motel, and in that area, like, I could just walk out on the street and get whatever kind of drugs that I wanted. So it'll be a very secure facility. You're probably not going to see our people because we pick them up and bring them back. And like I said, they have to have an acute or post-acute medical condition, a reason to be there. It's just not because they're homeless and being discharged. They have to be independent in their activities of daily living, so they're going to have to be able to transfer themselves, feed themselves. They have to be able to take their own medication. We will give them the medication, but they have to administer it on their own. Everyone will have their own bedroom, and then there'll be communal bathrooms. This allows us to take a little bit more acute patients than the average respite facility, because most of the respite facilities in the United States are located within homeless shelters, and it's just a room, probably like a 18 by 20 room, and it's lined up with beds, so you live communally, so you can't have anybody with any kind of wounds or anything like that. But we can take more acute patients because they'll have their own living space. We'll provide 24-hour assistance. So we'll have people on site working with our individuals 24 hours a day. I want to say the UND School of Family Medicine has agreed to be our primary care providers because they are the doctors that are generally going to see them in the emergency room, and it just makes sense for them to follow up with us. People ask a lot of times if we need any help with anything, and the one thing, volunteers. When we're actually open, so we just started renovations on this building, and they told us we should be able to be open by June. We really need people just to come and visit with our people. We wanted this to be a family setting, so just to come and visit with them, come eat dinner with them, just so it's amazing, like people, everybody has stories. You have stories, they have stories, and just that family atmosphere, I think, can make a really big and positive influence on people. Does anybody have any questions?
How many people can you serve at one time?
So the new facility will have 9 bedrooms. Our old facility, we could have taken 17 people at a time, but this is much smaller, but we think this will be safer because it's not 2 stories and we'll be able to maybe manage it a little bit better.
If somebody would like to give you money, how do they do that?
There's a website that you can go to donate, or you can mail it to us or find us. If there's like a specific thing that you would like to donate to, you can flag that and let us know. One thing about the other building, it was fully furnished. The hospital was kind enough to leave all of the furniture and everything in the apartments. When the renovation started, all of the furniture was moved to 2 apartments on one end of the building. Those are the 2 apartments that burned. So we lost all of the furniture. And items that we were able to purchase, like we had just purchased a brand new commercial washer and dryer. It was used 2 times, I believe. We're not allowed to go into the building to get any of our stuff, so we lost it all. And we didn't have, the only insurance that we personally had on the building was personal property because we didn't own the building. So, yeah.
So you won't be going, you have plans to try to go back to that building because it's a bigger place, or is that
No, we've been told by a common spirit that they're going to demo it because it costs more. It's about the same cost to demo or to rebuild, and we ended up with a better, like, obviously we would have wanted to go back to that building because of the location and the amount of people that we could take, but it's just not in the cards for us, so yeah.
what is your website?
It's steppingstoneministries.com.
When will you start taking clients?
They estimate that the tear out of the inside will take 2 months and then 2 months to rebuild. So they say we could be open by June, but they have a website where we can go on and look to see what they've done each week. And they're like halfway done with tear out, and it's only been a week. So my hope is we could be open by April or May, but they're saying June. And we have everything in place because we were supposed to open in the other facility a month after it burned down. So like everything is ready to go. We just needed the space. And I feel really bad that we had to do renovations of this bank building because it was beautiful inside. But when they renovated it for a bank. So the walls didn't go all the way up, so it wasn't fire safe. And believe me, we are doing everything to the letter in this new building, a fire suppression system, everything, and security on the inside and outside everywhere. Thank you very much. If anybody would like a flyer, I'll leave them up here. It just lists what our program does.